Everyone, and welcome to another AEC Plus Tech Talk. These events are organized by AEC Plus Tech, a platform and a community-driven database that keeps you updated with the latest and greatest tools and technologies in the AEC space. So today I'm so excited that we have two wonderful guest speakers who will share with us real-world experiences on streamlining operations, improving project tracking, and making smarter financial decisions with the right digital tools. This event will be recorded and saved on AC Plastic YouTube channel for future references. If you have any questions during the event, please feel free to post them on LinkedIn or YouTube chat box, and we will address them. So with that, I'm going to invite Chris to tell us about himself and his work. So Chris Vernon is the Director of Product Management at BQE Software. Thanks for joining us, Chris. So please, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Nicknaz. Hi, everyone. As Nicknaz said, I joined BQE not quite 2 years ago. I spent the last 15 years in back office technology for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, and really excited for what we have going at BQE. We've got a great team that's focused on building solutions for the A&E industry. BQE Core is our all-in-one solution for firm management, really tailored to the A&E space, founded by an architect and an engineer over 20 years ago. And we're managing the whole process from proposal through project management, time capture, invoicing, billing, and e-payments. And that's all backed by a full service team. And we're investing a lot in our products to grow and really fit the need in the space where there's a need for an easy to use tool that's developing and responding to the demands of the changing architecture and engineering environment. We, as I mentioned, kind of managing the different parts of winning projects, managing projects, making sure your teams are aligned, have a lot of different pieces, and so we're really focused on having support across all the different areas. For today, I'm really looking forward to speaking with Nicknaz and Rachel about the process of selecting firm management software, what some of those evaluation criteria are, and then discuss some areas specifically around project metrics and project and resource planning that we've been investing a lot in and refining here at BQE. And I do want to stress that BQE is really focused on empowering all the members of your team, as the workplace has become more remote, as our firms start to grow and become more distributed, making sure the teams are on the same page and connected with both each other and with your clients is a really important piece of having a successful firm, and also keeping staff engaged and focused on what they need to focus on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's joining us from Northworks Architects and Planners.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Nicknaz. So I'm Rachel Oleinick. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, which is kind of astonishing to say at this point in my life. I'm a licensed architect in Illinois, and I've been with Northworks for just about 10 years. In that time, I've progressed from a sort of architect at large, leading projects, working under other architects, to a principal of the firm. And in that time, we've really grown as a firm as well. So this kind of development of my career and the development of Northworks has gone in parallel. As a firm, we work across all kinds of different markets, across different project types, and all of that is unified under this collaborative approach where we don't really have a set style. We don't really have a set need to push onto our clients. We really work collaboratively with clients, internally with our consultants, and that's resulted in some of the works you can see here, where we have really executed some amazing projects all across the country.
Beautiful projects. Thanks so much, Rachel. This is amazing. So can you tell us, Rachel, about the challenges and basically the cracks that you had, in the process that led you to like reevaluate your firm management software? And
Yes, absolutely.
something new.
Yeah. So when I started with Northworks 10 years ago, we had about 15, 20 people, and we were in one office in Chicago. That's where we started. And since then, you can see on this timeline, we've basically exploded, not just in terms of number of employees, but also number of offices. And as we added all of those people in all of those places, it really became difficult to manage our projects and our staffing in a meaningful way with the tools we were using at the time. We had really outgrown them. And in many ways, it fell to the folks who were on boots on the ground trying to make sure their projects were getting executed properly to grapple with this issue. I came to this sort of in an interesting way. I was on a project and my boss asked me a very simple question: how many pieces of millwork on this project, which was enormous, are in production right now? And I had all of the data, but I had no way to consolidate it to answer that question, right off the cuff. So that sort of became my entry point into this data analysis side of the firm in a way that made better use of the information that we had. And adopting BQE Core was really critical for us to continue that, to manage this enormous amount of information that we now had at our fingertips.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. So the data helped you like make smarter decisions, and then you could like access all this data. So can you tell us like what were those like main criteria for evaluating the process you had and wanting to test and try something new?
Sure. So this is an image that we had pulled together for a presentation back in 2021, I believe. This was pitching BQE Core to the firm and basically saying, here are all these touch points that we're currently dealing with that don't communicate with one another, that we're manually updating in all of these different ways that we have to remember, okay, what did I put in this project Gantt chart? How does that relate to the allocations that we're assigning to different staff members across different offices? How does that relate to the project needs or the existing billing or the budget that we set for this project in the contract? So all of these things were really difficult to, it's doable when you have 15 employees in one office. It's completely unmanageable when you have it much larger than that. So I would say a lot of the criteria ended up being, where are we in billing on this particular project in this phase? And understanding that from at a glance without having to go through 6 different places and going, okay, well, this is what our last invoice is. Okay, but how does that tally with our time and expenses? Okay, but we assumed that we were going to issue this set, but it got delayed. And understanding all of those different impacts really became challenging with that old piecemeal sort of approach.
Yeah, and that's something we hear from really all of our customers, even those who are using firm management platforms or planning platforms where they have different elements in different places, and oftentimes also as firms grow, you sort of have the a cohort or a group who have been there a while and sort of know their practices and have good practices sort of through their experience. And then as you hire new folks in new places who have different patterns, you're sort of relying on individuals to come with a set of skills or a set of kind of a toolkit to manage those processes, and you hope they align, and you hope their toolkit's good and their Excel file is sharp, but oftentimes you get both discrepancies, and then you also get people who maybe get caught off guard by a scenario that they didn't consider, or a part of their Excel file or planning tool that doesn't really support the work that you're trying to do. So those are all very common things that come up for customers as they come into Core and work to standardize their processes.
Yeah, for sure.
Rachel, can you share a little bit about, one of the things I know you are keen on is sort of easy to digest information, and how different members of the team can access what they need in Core. Can you talk a little bit more about how that goes at Northworks?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the previous iteration, when we were dealing primarily with Excel files, I was largely responsible for improving upon what I inherited. What I inherited was not much smarter than graph paper. And so I built on this to try to create a tool that would more accurately, or rather avoid errors. So there would be some kind of a list that it would draw from, and that list would populate based on all these rules that I set up. It made for a very complicated Excel file, and a lot of folks in the studio were pretty intimidated by that. And because it was a mere Excel file that had to be updatable, it was also easy to break. So it really was difficult to encourage other project managers to make use of it in an effective way. So in a sense, I sort of built myself into a corner because I was capable of making all these updates and making corrections or whatever. But then I became saddled with the responsibility of maintaining it as well, which really wasn't going to be sustainable either, because I was still running projects at that time. So when we made the transition to BQE Core, what that opened up was the transparency for basically anybody in the firm. So based on their various security access, we could give the tools to the project managers and give them the empowerment to make their updates and review their projects and do all of that without having to go through an intermediary or go through a process that was really easy or prone to error if you missed something on one of the 6 places that you had to check.
Sure. Right. That's great. Yeah. I mean, and I think that both that, I think of independence and accountability, right? Independence that the project team can manage their project and run things the way that they need to, that fit the demands of the client and the project and the team. But also they're accountable to the same things everyone else are, and so having those two sides, I think, are really important as we work with these little project groups, and as project teams form and finish projects and reform and change. That's really important. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Another aspect that I found useful is it's not just empowering for individual PMs to make use of it, but it's one place of truth. So there's no ambiguity about where a given project stands or how much time has been recorded against it. There's only one place where it's recorded. So there's no place where something might get duplicated or put in error. And so when I have weekly meetings with the directors of the different offices at Northworks to review all of the time that we're expecting individuals in the different studios to apply to all these different projects. And it's a lot of horse trading. We're trying to figure out, okay, who's available this week? Oh, who's got a deadline, whatever. But we're all looking at the same information. And that has been so critical for the efficiency of making sure that time is going where it needs to go.
Yeah. And Richard, can you tell us a little bit about your adoption process? Because with any new tool and solution, it's not just purchasing the technology and tool, but it's also creating that behavior and culture and convincing, the PMs and everyone in the office. So how did that work for you? So how long was the learning process? Were there anyone in the office who was like opposed and would still prefer the Excel sheet because they already knew how to work,
Yeah. So it was definitely a very big change. And we attempted to ease into it in how we use the various tools that are available in BQE Core. So the first place we started was with time and expenses, because that was a pretty low learning curve. Most of time and expense software is going to be fairly similar in terms of how it's built and what you can expect as a user to interact with. So that was an easier adoption for the full studio. Getting into the full use of allocations and forecasting took us much longer. And in fact, it was only last February, I think, it might have been about a year, that we finally retired that Excel spreadsheet and went fully over into allocations and forecasting completely in BQE Core. And a lot of that was learning how to, I'm trying to remember how many different tutorial sessions we did. We had gone through them with our customer success manager initially, and a lot of that was geared toward not just the people in the studio, but also to me as the administrator, to make sure that we were setting everybody up for success. But beyond that, it was learning how Northworks wanted to use the tool. So not just what the tool was and what functions it had, but how we were going to adopt it. And that was a much longer process that was sort of, again, collaborative. So it would be training sessions that I would lead to say, okay, this is what we can do with the tools, and here's where I think we should go. But there might have been comments from the different directors to say, hey, wait a minute, what about this use case that might come up? Oh, okay, let's figure out how we can adopt to that. So it's definitely been a longer process. I feel like every new aspect that comes through is also like, oh, here's a whole new tool that we got to learn, like the one that's just been released and is going to continue to get released, the project planner, which I'm very, very excited about. So there's always something new that adds to the value that we find.
That's great to hear. I mean, I think, I love that last part, Rachel, in particular of, we're, the all-in-one offering, is great. And I think sometimes firms come into the process and say, holy cow, I'm not ready to take on this whole thing all at once. And I think your experience is very common, and something our implementation team really focuses on is, what are the immediate needs of the firm to get up and running? What are the places where the firm has sophistication and staff and process in order to support different elements? And I think project planning and resource planning is one. We have a CRM module is another. There's some firms who have a team that's very focused on going out and winning work, and so that CRM module fits really well into that day one. And then there are other firms who say, gee, we're still kind of having project leads and principals chase projects, and they sort of do that on the side, and we're going to kind of leave that as an unofficial process for now, and we'll kind of come around to that as we mature. So I think those are that kind of progression of adoption is very typical, and I think something that as firms evaluate software changes and process changes, I think I feel confident in the experience of our teams to help support that process. So I love hearing that.
Wonderful. So that sounds very empowering. And now, Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about your performance metrics and your success metrics that you have in your office, for different offices and employees and all that?
Sure. So, of course, for every different aspect of the firm, there are different metrics to measure, and BQE Core makes it a lot easier to make those measurements. Some of the measurements we'll take will be prospects the conversion rate for prospects. How successful are we in transforming leads into real projects that are going to win money? Another is the adherence or the how closely we align with the budget that we set out at the beginning of a project, that is basically estimating, okay, this might be a project based on a percentage of cost of construction, but how does that break down per phase? And are we accurate in terms of the estimations we're making for the time and expenses that would go into each of those phases? How close are we? So that can be a very powerful tool now to aggregate that time and expense information, the billing information, all together in a much more straightforward way. Another is the shift that we're seeing in different markets. So as we've opened different offices over the course of the firm's growth, we'll notice like, oh, okay, maybe the office that is out of Aspen is seeing a bit of a slowdown in that region, but the South Florida office is suddenly seeing a huge growth. And we can analyze that in terms of how the billing is running, what kind of time is being run on different projects, what kind of conversions we're seeing, and make appropriate shifts as needed too for internally for our staff or for sort of pursuit of projects from a marketing perspective as well. So all those things are now available to us in a much easier to digest format so that we can really make smart decisions about running the firm.
That's amazing. So you can access all this data that in the past you could not access in an easy way, in an organized way. Wonderful. And then so as far as your project and resource planning, so I'm curious, how is BQE?
Before we get to that, sorry, Nicholas, I just wanted to touch on, I think, one of the areas, Rachel, that we're focusing on this year is around, standardizing some of the metrics we're using and making them more available in the application. So when it comes to sort of an individual project success from a financial standpoint, what are some of the key indicators that you're using there at Northworks?
So a lot of it will be, as I said, making sure that we're on track with our budgeting. There are in BQE Core that also offer these kinds of reminders or notifications. This was a fairly recent tool where you can pin an email or other notification to a percentage of the contract or a percentage of the budget that's been spent based on the time and expense entries, which has been fabulous because now instead of a check-in on a monthly basis or whatever the recurrence might be and having a surprise, unpleasant or otherwise, now BQE is offering a way to keep tabs on things without having to remember, oh, right, I need to go check on this. Let me see where we are. It's going to offer that as an automation, so saving some time there. So that's one aspect that I think has been a big part of the success. Another way that we measure success of the project is, of course, satisfaction of the client and satisfaction of the team. So if we're hitting billing rates appropriately, but everyone's miserable because we're pushing really hard or something like that, we can see that. We can see if someone is pulling 60-hour weeks and make that a priority to address. And that was really opaque before we adopted this software. So it's not even just the financial health of a project, it's also the health of the team itself and the firm culture. Sure.
No, that's great. And yeah, I mean, I know we'll talk a little bit about resource planning, I think, in a little bit here, but yeah, that's a great call out is you've got to kind of keep your eye on a few of these gauges or levers and how to provide relief there. I'm going to share a few more because I think I mentioned kind of our initiative this year around putting metrics front and center. We released last November our inaugural benchmarking reports, one for architecture and one for engineering firms. Those covered about 1,400 different firms. In the chat, there'll be a link to gain access to those reports. And we're primarily evaluated on sort of 12 essential metrics, some which you can see called out here for firms. And that's looking at sort of what's the health across the industry. And I think as we're moving and developing functionality in Core to gain better access to this, for a firm like Northworks or smaller firms or larger firms, being able to evaluate these types of things within BQE Core from different pages by filtering on different projects or looking at the performance for a client. Some of those financial or team metrics, even around utilization, will start to come to light more. And we've invested a lot in the last 12 or so months on a new project center and landing page, which gives kind of an embedded analytical experience so you can understand how the project's progressing. And in the coming weeks, we're releasing updates into a suite of dashboards and reports that really allow you to give sort of a heads up display on all your projects of, what's my margin, my direct labor multiplier, realization rate at the project or phase level. And you have the ability to define what the thresholds for sort of poor, fair, good, excellent are for your firm specifically, and do things like sort and filter to quickly find projects that are over or underperforming, and then have updated metrics around ensuring that you're kind of keeping the tabs that you need to, and that you have information about the project sort of at your fingertips here without necessarily having to go run a report and go off and kind of down that track. You can do it right from the application. And the last piece that we're really excited about is our Insights initiative, where we're building out a new set of tools around dashboards and analytics, which is going to give our firms the ability to have a lot more configurability directly from within Core on how they analyze data, what are the sort of widgets that their firm is operating from when analyzing, be it project metrics, accounts receivable, time and expense, the project planning. So each of these widgets would have configurable columns. There'll be offerings where you could come in and design your own widgets or build reports, and really kind of start to get a much more tailored view of how's my firm performing, what are the specifics that I want to pay attention to as it relates to, say, margin. Am I focused on, the contract? Am I focused on services only but not expenses, right? So those types of views are really important as firms, want to kind of zero in on different things. And so rather than a one size fits all offering, we're really moving towards a much more tailored experience, as you can see here and imagine kind of how the filtering would go. So those are some of the areas that we're investing in, as I said, now, in addition to what the existing analysis tools are across Core.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Chris. That's very helpful. I love that. I love it that everything is designed and tailored and customized for AEC, for AE basically. And I actually have a question for you. I know that you have thousands of users.
Mm-hmm.
So are these companies mostly small and medium-sized firms that are using BQE Core to optimize the management, or you also have larger firms? So are there specific features that are mostly useful for small and medium-sized firms, not for larger firms? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say our firms are primarily kind of 3 to 300, which is obviously quite a range in terms of complexity. I think the Northworks story that Rachel shared, I think they've been particularly successful, but is a common one that we have a lot of long-term relationships where BQE Core is part of that firm growing and expanding into different offices or taking on more projects. So, the reasons that firms come to Core are pretty consistent around some of the things that we've talked about with the all-in-one, being able to serve things like CRM, accounting, that sort of thing, as well as integration. So while we're building these advanced analytics items, some of our more advanced firms are already pulling these out through APIs or through Power BI or other integrations in order to have those answers and do the kind of number crunching outside of BQE Core. As far as functionality goes, and firms at different sizes using different items, I think Rachel's story about needing to manage that horse trading process for a lot of firms at 10, 15, even 20 people, having having that run through Excel or having that run through everyone be in the same room is pretty manageable. And so firms that come to us are doing that today. And so the adoption of tools like that in Core is going to be down the road a bit versus pretty much everyone gets in with time and expense and billing and managing their projects, rather than kind of going all the way to resource allocation and planning that way. So I'd say that's kind of most of the tools. It's a question of how refined you want to be, how tight are your security controls, how kind of narrow are the paths and tight are the structures. As you grow, of course, having consistency across offices and a larger firm is much more important. And so BQE Core can really grow with you in that respect. Whereas a firm of 6 or 12 or 18, can run with a pretty basic setup in that regard.
I would say, to add to Chris's description, from the architecture side, BQE Core has amazing tools, but if you don't have a champion in the studio or in the office to really push for this, like any other piece of software adoption, it takes work, and it is going to be uncomfortable. So it can be just a bit of a reality check to say, yeah, this software has all these tools that are going to be so great. Oh, you want me to use them? Oh, okay. Now I need to learn how to do that and understand what the new process is. So that's been really a lot of what we've been working with over the past 3 years or so, 4 years, is grappling with all of the functionality that's at our disposal and making sure that the people who need to use it are familiar enough and comfortable enough to do so.
Yeah,
that's a great call out. And I think there's for better or for worse, and I'm going to make a generalization. We've all met the project manager who says, "Oh, I want to analyze the time, but I don't want to input the time," and that's obviously a hard nut to crack, and something that is more of a cultural change. And and working closely with them, our implementation teams find a lot of success making that really worthwhile for folks.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. So with that, now we can talk about resource planning. Rachel, if you can tell us about, so before and after adopting BQE Core, so how is BQE Core helping you with that planning, with that process?
Oh my gosh. So as I mentioned, we started with an Excel spreadsheet that wasn't much more complex than a graph paper. And it looked at 1 week at a time, and maybe 19 people at one time, all in the same office, across probably 50 projects. And even at that level of simplicity, which is not to say that it's simple, it does take a lot of work to even manage that much. We were unable to forecast to say, okay, when is this project going to need more time? And how is that going to impact other projects? Where are the deadlines that we're going to see? How can we look forward a little bit further into the future to understand when we might need to hire someone or when we might have a slow period that we really need to make sure we're filling with the pipeline of prospects. It was hard to even manage prospects with that method because it didn't really factor in until the prospect suddenly became a project. And it became really a challenge to account for all of that. So a lot of the benefits that I've seen and that I've heard from my colleagues is the ability to add all of this time, and not just time, because in my gut, I feel like this week we need this time. It can be really data-driven and based on, okay, what was in the contract? What did we anticipate for the duration of the project? How much time and fee are we allocating for this phase? And all of those tools are now consolidated into BQE Core. So you can set up the project with this budget, pull allocations down from the budget that you set based on historical data that you might have about similar projects in similar regions, and then start assigning them to different people or to groups of people if you're not sure yet, like, okay, I'm not sure who's going to work on this, but it's going to be somebody in the Philadelphia office or somebody at the project associate level. And really plan for this in a much larger time scale. So you can complete the duration of the entire project if you want, and really mark it all out according to the project schedule, and have a great understanding of where that individual project needs are going to be. And what I'm extremely excited about is the project planner, where it's not just one project at a time that you get to see that. It's multiple projects. So you really have a much better sense of where the firm is at any given moment, to see, okay, what can we expect for revenue next month? What can we expect for expenses? What can we expect for new hires? We have interns coming in maybe for the summer, or someone's going on parental leave, or all these different factors that were virtually impossible to manage in Excel are now able to be added and reviewed in a very intelligent and pretty straightforward way in BQE Core.
Wonderful.
That's great to hear, Rachel. And as far as like just from a process perspective, technology aside, it sounds like kind of particularly with the growth of these offices that work's happening kind of cross office or intra office. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how, from a yes, Core is helping you understand what those, where there's opportunities, but can you talk a little bit about how the kind of the project team relationships work between offices, and how individuals are split between projects and whether those are in their office or not? Because I think that's often kind of the other side of this is what are the hours and how do the numbers sort of break down, but also the realities of co-location versus not, particularly as you've grown.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we have offices all across the country. And what's interesting about them is that a lot of them are fairly small. We have quite a few that are just one or two people. So the Chicago is still the mothership, as my bosses call it. We have about 35 people in Chicago. Jackson is the next size, and that's about 15. I think we're at 15 right now. So there's still substantial offices. The advantage that Northworks has is we can still offer that boutique firm feel, but have this bench of very talented architects and designers from all across the country. And that's often how we do staff things, is to say, okay, who has the expertise in whatever office they may be that is really appropriate for this particular project? So if we have someone who has a lot of expertise in multifamily, we're probably going to have them work with other folks on multifamily projects, wherever that multifamily project may be. It might be in South Carolina, it might be in Wyoming, it might be in Tennessee, could be anywhere. So that's one aspect, is looking at the kinds of experience and talent that we have in different places. Another that we've looked at very carefully is, as we develop younger and less experienced folks in the firm, how do we partner them with people who are local on jobs that might not be local to their office? And so that's been something that we've really found success in. A large part of the pandemic loss, I would say, is, at least in terms of that inter-office cooperation or mentoring, it's rarely face-to-face now. And so it really has to be planned much more carefully. Allowing it to happen organically, as it once did when we were all in the same office and we were there 5 days a week, is really not viable anymore. So the approach that we take now is, okay, we have a project associate in, say, the Philadelphia office, and we want them to work on this project that's out of Chicago that is actually being built in Florida. How do we manage that? Well, okay, let's pair that project associate with a more senior person, like a senior architect, in that same office, so that they can see that development together. They're in the same time zone. They're easy to work with. They might have their own, Slack channel or something like that. They're more familiar with those folks who are in their home office than they might be with people outside that office. And that really sets us up for success when we have these blended teams that are from multiple offices.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, and I think kind of that comment about, particularly as as firms manage the remote co-location, different offices, I think for that generation that's coming up, that that hasn't had those sort of the muscle memory sort of what it means to work with teams, and having had those face-to-face interactions, I think that's a great way to support that and ensure that they've got what they need, rather than kind of being plugged into something where they're maybe they're the only person in a different office to the rest of the team, and that's that's hard for anybody, much less someone who maybe doesn't have that experience. So that's a great sounds like a great setup. Thanks for sharing.
For sure. And another aspect of it is that I believe all this data is documented somewhere, so later you can go back and see what is working and what is not working. So that, like, senior designer who was added, so did that help with like meeting the deadline like on time? Or because that's often the case, like not accessing that data after a project, because everything happens so fast. Look, there are all these deadlines and there are all these like new projects, so architects are just busy like pursuing new projects, meeting them, and there's often not that time to go back and review, even with like, I don't know, Revit projects, and they're all you can't go back and review what is working and what is not working, because they are not all documented in one organized place in an organized fashion. So with BQE Core, I believe that all this information is documented, so you can go back and see what it is that is working and what it is that is not working, right?
Yeah, and I've gone back. I've been asked to go back and pull time reports for different individuals to say, hey, what happened here? How did we get so far off for this month? Or how did we miss this deadline? Because I know we were putting in time. And that data may not be the answer for what occurred, but it's definitely an indicator to say something here needs to be addressed. And that has been super valuable, because again, previously, all of this was divorced and not transparent. So I might be able to see what someone is allocated for in one given week. I have no idea how much time they've spent up to this point, or how much time they've used of the allocations. So now it's all together, and I can say like, hey, why are we pulling 65-hour weeks here? Stop. And I can see that immediately. It's not a delay where something suddenly shows up in an invoice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And if I can share a little bit more of what some of the tools that we have today, and Rachel's mentioned a couple times her enthusiasm for the project planner. So we have resource allocation, which is sort of what are the tasks on the project, and then the forecast of sort of how they play out over time. So those have been parts of Core for really since it was created 8 years ago. And those are all integrated, as Rachel mentioned, into the time tracking function. So it's both driving staff, they'll see those allocations appear in their time card, as well as, from an analysis standpoint, how do those plans compare to the budget? How do they compare to what was actually recorded by the team? How we're sort of on track with the balance or not? Those all come into play. And what the project planner provides is really a much more graphical interface to interact with what's in the top section, the projects themselves and the timelines and the activities. And in the bottom section, most often this is viewed by resource. So, I've laid out on the project above a series of tasks that are to be completed as part of schematic design. And in the bottom section here, I can see for Jacob, for instance, what the where's a week that he's overloaded, right? He's got over his hours for that week, and so it's going to call that out in red, and I can kind of see how his work tapers off week over week. I can also have a direct mapping. These blue underlines here are showing me when that work is meant to happen, and so if I need to move 8 hours from the week of the 31st out to a later week, I can do that. But I might trigger one of these orange triangles, which is saying you're planning to do work outside of when you said you were going to, and that happens more often than the other way, right? But at least you want to be aware of that, and you can see, okay, I'm sort of out of bounds on my time frame, and you can discuss that and consider that as a team. What are the knock-on effects to that? Do I have to extend this task? Are there other tasks that are tied to that, or that are going to be shifted out because of that? And then finally, kind of the third perspective here is around the budget or the scheduled hours. So if I said a task was going to take a certain number of hours, have I allocated all those, or excuse me, have I scheduled all those out, or what's my balance? So I can easily see, am I going over or likely to go over from a cost perspective? So that's all built in here. We released this last month, so you have the ability to come in and schedule this now, and we've got a whole slew of features that are planned over the course of this year, which are really going to build around this. Things like scheduling optimization and automating kind of how that week-to-week schedule happens, how AI modeling can be used to look across your resources and find opportunities and gaps. Enhancing how we manage milestones and the kind of task tracking of, yes, we're tracking hours here, but did that deliverable, get done? Is it on track? Has it been delivered to the client? And then finally, as Rachel mentioned, these are all hours here, but I can also toggle over to amounts, so I can see the forecast, and I could look at that by resource or by project. So I can actually see, all right, what's my burn rate on these projects? When in aggregate are these tailing off? What are those, going to be those gaps that I might need to shift work to cover, or seek out some prospects in order to fill those in? So it's all integrated into the time tracking. The dollars are driven by how I define my fee schedule. So what am I billing for a given type of work? And then that's all tied into how I'm managing my projects. And so this is where a lot of these elements that we've been talking about today really come together and start to shine. So we're really, really excited about this. We have a lot of existing customers who are, really keen to incorporate this as a way to improve their profitability, improve how their staff are kind of managed and how happy they are. I think Rachel's comments about that were great, as well as hopefully look to grow and expand their businesses.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm personally genuinely very excited about this tool, BQE Core. You know, most of the solutions and tools that we look at AEC Plastic are either like design technologies or construction technologies, and BQE Core is the first like firm management, like business operation tool that we are featuring, and we are very excited about it because you know AEC is such an underserved, like second list digitized, you know, industry, and you know solutions like BQE are very helpful, and you know making the process more optimized and making everyone feel better about you know their work and their workflow and the process. So Rachel, I'm curious, how did you first hear about BQE Core and how did you find it? Yeah.
So this was, I would say it must have been in 2020. I remember driving down a back road in southern Illinois on a conference call with some of the partners discussing the different options that we had to look at for management software. And there were a few that we were investigating. I will say I have zero regrets about going with BQE Core. We've grown together, it feels a little bit. And at that time, we were grappling with having multiple offices. The Jackson office had opened in 2017. We didn't have a whole lot of people out there, but we were still getting bigger. We were probably over 40 at that point. We had, I'm trying to remember the sequence now. I believe we had opened the Philadelphia office in 18, 19. So it was getting too complicated to really manage in any meaningful way. It became sort of a critical point, an inflection point to say, this is not something that we can do without something that's more all in one. And I feel like one thing that seems to be common with offices like ours that have grown from something very small, it started out with just the two partners back in 2005, up to 75 people, is the folks who are running the firm are rarely anything but architects. So I don't have any business training. I don't have IT training. I don't have any of that training. I'm an architect, and that's how I was trained. So I know how projects are run, and I know how buildings are built. But understanding the right way to manage a firm or manage all the different aspects that have to go into that was really trial by fire. And to stretch that metaphor a little bit, I was starting to feel the burn at that point in 2020. So finding BQE Core was really a way to consolidate all of that and a godsend. Like it made all of the difference. And I really believe that it allowed us to expand as fast as we did. Without that tool, we really would have been spending enormous amounts of time on the tedium of going through all these different things and really not getting a great idea where we were anyway.
Wow, that's such a empowering, beautiful story. I love that. That's awesome. And the champion that you mentioned, so you were, I'm sure, one of the champions, right? Yep.
Oh, it's only me. It's me. I'm the champion. That's right, beating the drum. I do have a couple people who are in some of the other studios who are like, yes, this is great. This is a fantastic tool, and it's really helping me understand where I am and how my project is running. And so those folks are invaluable to make sure that we are getting the data in that needs to be there and that we are reviewing all this and being consistent. We don't get consistency from everybody, but that's okay.
Yep, for sure. And what has been the biggest challenge, Rachel? I know Chris is here, but please be honest. Tell us.
I mean,
bring it on.
A lot of the challenge has been, I'll say, getting the data out of BQE and into a format I can present to the partners. The partners, the two founding partners, are not in BQE. They don't have the time. And so they want to see reports that consolidate the information in a very digestible way. What I am looking forward to is the revamp of the report center, where we can really customize. Right now, there's a very wide range of templates that are available, but they are templates. And so if there's something that you're looking for that the partner is like, hey, I want to see something really unusual that no one's ever thought of before, I'm a little bit like, well, here's the 3 things that I can pull that kind of touch on that. And I don't have time to learn Power BI right now. So this is where we're stuck. As I said, I feel like BQE Core and Northworks have sort of grown in some of the same direction in the same ways. So this report center overhaul, where the sort of internal Power BI, where we will be able to make those customizations, is something I'm really looking forward to.
Great.
Hopefully
Wonderful.
this year.
So,
Very soon.
Glad to hear that. And I think that's exactly the sorts of things. Yeah, it's the data is there, but how snappy is it to get to it and have the insight and have it be tailored to the questions that my firm likes to ask, because there are a lot of different ways to say, oh, well, I don't want to take that into account, but I want this part. And so being able to have that specific to your firm is a big thing that's focused on. So I'm glad to hear we're aligned there,
wonderful.
Rachel.
And Chris, what's next for BQE Core? What are you guys currently working on? So can you tell us about like the next couple months, new features, new release, whatever you have?
Yep. Yeah. So the 2 I spoke about, the project planner and that insights initiatives, are in full swing, and we'll sort of, the insights will go into beta late this month, and then will become generally available in the summer. And then we have teams that are working on our accounting module, so providing more flexibility for firms to better manage multiple entities and how the reporting works, to ensure that kind of, particularly as firms get into larger firms and more complex situations and accounting demands, that those can be supported in the easily and quickly. And then we're working on embedding a payroll offering, so that firms, in addition to managing accounting, can manage their payroll directly through Core. And a lot of the kind of transition of payroll time from Core, can go directly to a payroll provider, and that payroll provider can manage all the reporting and taxes and documentation. So those are some of the big areas. In addition to enhancing our CRM, we just launched a new mobile navigation that's native to both iOS and Android, which we've had for a long time, which is really geared towards speeding the tasks that you can do on mobile. So we're doing kind of a lot of things, top to bottom, and I think that I started with kind of what our level of investment is and our commitment to grow with our customers, as Rachel so kindly described. That's really our focus. And so we're firing on all cylinders and making sure that across all these modules in Core, we're taking steps forward to deliver more for our customers.
That's amazing. So that's something actually that I was going to ask. So that means people can work on their phones, right? And put in their time and track everything.
I use my
Yep.
phone every day it's running right now. I have my timer running. I'll use it for taking photos of receipts for expenses. It makes it really, really easy to just do those tedious things right away.
Amazing. That sounds
Exactly. That's a great call. Yeah. So it's pretty full featured, but approving expenses, entering time, those types of things where, as Rachel pointed out, it's right there, or it's on the go, or I'd have to deal with uploading a file and scanning something. It's like, just get it in with the phone and off you go.
great. Wonderful. Super useful. Amazing. So thanks so much for this insightful conversation. A lot of things, to unpack, of course, but unfortunately we are at time. So to our audience, please check out BQE Core. Please reach out to Rachel and Chris to learn more. This is a great, powerful solution that you should all try and hopefully test and adopt. Thanks for being with us today, and thanks to you, Rachel and Chris, for your time. Is there any final comment you would like to add?
I'd say a big thank you to you, Nick Naz, and to Rachel. I think it's as a product person, it's always so rewarding to hear firsthand that what we work so hard on is working so well for our customers.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. I will do one more little drum beating. I have never had a piece of software that had better customer service. I get a person on the phone every single time. Our customer rep is on it. He talks to me on Teams. When I have a problem, I hear something back from him in like 10 minutes. It's phenomenal.
Love it. I love it.
Love
Thanks,
hearing
Chris.
that.
Thanks, BQE Core, for what you're doing for the industry. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, you too.